Hi, and welcome to the Taftie 2021 annual conference and the third public event under the chairmanship of the Slovak Innovation and Energy Agency. My name is Kristina Korčeková. I am an innovation consultant at Civita Slovakia, where I work primarily with innovative startups and companies, supporting them in their climate and sustainability projects. Today's program will be focusing on our sustainable carbon-free future, how to leverage the tools EU and the member states and the innovation agencies have at their disposal through support schemes, cooperation, and innovative startups. Our keynote speaker today, well, it's just the day, is Maaike Emme Damen. She's from the Netherlands, and she's a world-renowned expert in circular economy, working for Access Material Exchange as a startup that she has founded. Next up, we will welcome on a common platform several speakers. It's going to be Mr. Alan Haig from DG Research and Innovation, Mr. Philip McCann, professor at the Sheffield University, and two of the guests that are here with me in the studio, that's Eva Pružincová and Rastislav Milošević from the Slovak Innovation and Energy Agency. They are working with the European Structural and Investment funds. Together, we will be discussing about the tools EU offers to the member states and to the innovators from cradle to the market. And after a short break, we will be joined in a short interview with the member of the European Parliament, Mr. Martin Hojsík. And after that, concluding our program will be two presentations by Slovak innovative companies in the format of Innovation Safari. First up is going to be Inobat, that is a company developing a factory and an R&D center for e-mobility batteries here in Slovakia. And then Ediris, a platform for optimizing feed for animals and livestock. Yes, I remembered it correctly. But let us first hear from the director of the Slovak Innovation and Energy Agency, our host today, Mr. Peter Blaškovič.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you on the second Taftie meeting, which is focused on carbon-free strategies, where European Union is definitely becoming a leader. I hope you will enjoy this event and this conference, and you will have a great time. Carbon-free strategies are a big challenge for the whole world, not only for the Europe. The Europe committed themselves that there will be carbon-free or carbon neutrality by 2050. 2050 is coming quite soon, so a lot of work is in front of us and a lot of challenges which we'll be facing. And this conference and all the workshops which are related to this will be focusing on how to achieve this very ambitious target to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. So once again, I hope you will have a great day and a great conference, and please enjoy.
Thank you very much, Peter, for these pre-recorded words from the Presidential Garden here in Bratislava. And now I'm happy to welcome Ms. Maaike Emme Damen. She's an MIT Innovator Under 35, which is an excellent honor, and a pioneer in circular economy and sustainability. She has been working towards reshaping the waste paradigm through various companies and projects. Currently, she's the founder of the already mentioned Access Materials Exchange, which is a platform where companies can exchange, buy, and sell excess products or materials. And more importantly, it matches materials with their highest value potential to create continuous material loops. Also, she has been behind the Resources Passport, an initiative or an approach which has been worked into the policy at the European and national levels. And it is being used by the Access Materials Exchange and other companies to start mapping the economy's material metabolism. She's also a very experienced public speaker, 3 times in the TEDx talks, so you can watch her now with us. Hi, Maaike, do you hear me? Do you see me?
Hi, thank you so much. Yes, I hear and see you.
Excellent. We're very happy to have you here, and now you can start your presentation.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. Let me share my screen. Is it working?
Yes, it is working.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. I hope you are having an amazing day. Thanks for having me at this conference. As said, my name is Maaike. I'm the founder of the Excess Materials Exchange, and today I'm going to talk to you about sustainability and innovation. And I want to start by asking you a question. What comes to mind when you see this image? I can tell you what comes to my mind. Gold mine. Because did you know that there's actually tons of gold in the sewer system? Actually, there's even more gold in the world's sewer systems than there's left in the world's gold mines. In a city the size of Amsterdam, which is around 860,000 inhabitants, every year, 10 million euros worth of gold, silver, and other valuable metals is flushed down the drain every year. Isn't that a waste? What comes to mind when you see this image? I can tell you what comes to my mind, and you can probably guess. Gold mine. We're throwing away so many valuable materials from the products that we use, our cars, our clothes, our smartphones, our laptops. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because when we're talking about sustainability, when we're talking about innovation, very often we just focus on energy. If we're talking about carbon emission reductions, the majority of the conversations, also in a policy level, is focused on energy emission reductions, energy efficiency, you name it. Whereas 45% of emissions come from producing the stuff that we use every day. Our cars, our clothes, our smartphones, our steel beams, you name it, 45%. So it's actually really important that we start talking about all these materials. And I want to quickly run you through why that is relevant. Because over time, we have mined more and more resources from the Earth's crust. And you can see here. And up until 2050, the number is almost going to double from 2017. So it's really ramping up exponentially. So we're extracting more and more. And at the same time, the products that we use these days are quite complex. I mean, there's lots of materials in our smartphones, in our MRI scanners, in our solar panels, where in the 1700s, as you can see here, we used only a couple, with some iron, some copper, some lead. That was it. So the complexity is increasing as well of our products. And why is that relevant? Because we're mining more and more from the Earth. It's finite. There's not infinite materials in the Earth's crust. So if we talk about physical scarcity, which means the amount of materials that are left in the Earth's crust, we see that materials are becoming physically scarce. And this is based upon estimates, of course, estimates on whether or not we can reach these new ore deposits, whether or not we have new technologies to mine it. But based upon that, these are the best estimates that we have. And it's not super promising. Also not if we want to reduce carbon emissions by renewable energy solutions. A lot of the materials we need for that are becoming scarce. Physically scarce. But remember, we already mined a lot. So the EU, and you might be aware of this, has made a list of materials that are critical for the functioning of the economy. And here you see some of these materials like borate, indium, helium, phosphorus. And what you also see is that we import the majority of these materials. We don't have a lot in the ground in Europe. So lots coming from China, some from the US. And what that means is that besides physical scarcity, we also run the risk of economic and political scarcity. And how that works is that China, when they, for example, put in place export restrictions or export quota, we might have a problem. And actually, 2 weeks ago, there was an article in The Guardian that said 1 in 5 companies in Europe have supply chain issues. It's a lot. And then political scarcity is when there's political tensions and conflicts. So we mine a lot. We're very dependent on imports, but we have a lot around us as well. I mean, in Europe, we have a lot of stuff. But if you look at the right column, you see the recycling rate. And the recycling rates sometimes are 0%, 1%. We don't do anything with it. Isn't that crazy? Because it's all there, it's all around us. We've mined the majority already. And with that, the worldwide waste mountain is expected to grow even further. So we're dumping more and more waste, with 70% towards 2050. However, what companies don't usually get is that their waste is actually an untapped gold mine, worth 145 billion in Europe alone, which of course is an estimate. And this doesn't represent the circular economy opportunity, because that includes energy. This is just companies' waste, 145 billion in Europe alone. And we can actually start tapping into that today, which is amazing. So what do we need to start tapping into that? Well, if we want to start exchanging materials on a large scale, because remember, we have everything mined, we have it in Europe, we just don't do anything with it. We need to have information about the quality of materials. Like, is it the right quality if I want to have new windows? Is it the right quality of insulation for the windows that I want, the glass? The timing, if I have a building project and I want to reuse doors and I need them tomorrow, but the doors that I found are only being released in 2 months, it doesn't work out. So I need to know when they're going to be released to make sure the timing works out. Then the quantity, maybe I need 1,000 doors, but I can only find 500. So where am I going to get the other 500 from? And then the location. So maybe I find a really good match, the timing works out, but it's a match between Slovakia and New Zealand, which is not the most optimal match and might financially not be beneficial at all. So we need all this information to start doing the matchmaking. And that is what we do with the excess materials exchange. So we exchange excess materials. And we like to describe ourselves as a dating site for materials. So we match supply and demand of materials, but above all, materials with their highest value reuse option. And what that means is that there is a positive business case, that there's environmental impact reduction, and that is carbon emissions, but not just carbon emissions, also energy use, land use, toxicity. And then we look at the social side as well, because sometimes products are reused or recycled under very, very poor labor conditions. And we do not want to say that that is sustainable in any way. So that is what we look at. And let me give you a super easy example to understand that, because I guess the majority of you has had a cup of coffee a day. And when you make coffee this morning, you have coffee leftovers and you throw them away. And this also happens on a large scale, company restaurants, for example. So they make coffee. You're not going to make coffee twice out of it, because this is going to be awful tasting coffee. And companies pay to get rid of the waste. So it's a cost. Whereas what you could also do with these coffee leftovers is collect them and use them as pigment for ink, as bioplastic, biofibers. You can use them as water filters. You can grow mushrooms on it. And you can all do this in a cascade. And in every step of the way, you can make money. And this doesn't only hold true for coffee leftovers. This holds true for the majority of our materials. So that is what we enable. And how do we do that? So first, we give materials an identity. Then we add intelligence. And lastly, we integrate. And I'll walk you briefly through all three of them. So first of all, identity. And Christina mentioned it briefly, the resources passport. So what this basically is an ingredient list on our products, like we have on our food products, but then on our laptops, for example, or on our clothes. So it gives you an insight in what is in the product. What is it composed of? How much gold is there? Can I take it apart? Is it easy to take it apart? What is the function of the gold in the product? Who's the owner of the product? Where is it located? When will it be released? And if we have this information, we can start making the business case. And the business case helps, because otherwise you don't know that you could get gold out of the sewer system or out of a phone or whatever. So we give products this digital identity. And what that looks like is this. So ideally, and of course, I mean, it's been implemented into European policy, international policies, companies are using it, but it takes a while. And ideally, you start at the mine. We're not there yet. But we're starting at the mine, and you give a digital passport that you, with a QR code or an RFID chip, here you see a logo, attached to the physical product. And you can follow it through the supply chain. And it's modular, like Lego blocks. So every step of the way, when something is added, you can add this information. And that's helpful because if a product is screwed, you need to do a very different action to take it apart than when it is glued together. So that information is relevant for maintenance, for life extension, for recycling. So you track and trace it all through the supply chain after people throw it away, and then it goes into new destinations. You can follow it as well. And with that, you're able to tell the story of stuff. So here in the Netherlands, there's this bench. And you can scan the QR code on the bench, and you can see where all the materials come from, where they have been. And this doesn't only work for benches, but also for insulation. So there's a building in the Netherlands where there is insulation from jeans that were worn by celebrities. So you can really start telling the story of stuff and help this financial business case and the environmental impact reduction. So this is the identity part. Once we've covered that, we track and trace, we go over to the intelligence part. And we use two different things. We use blockchain and AI. And I know these are buzzwords and sound very fancy, but I'll tell you why we use blockchain. Because if you want to exchange materials at scale, there is a need for privacy and there is a need for transparency. We need transparency because we need to know what is in these materials. We need to know what the characteristics are, the components are, to know if we can actually use them for the next destination. But this information is very sensitive information. So companies don't just want to put that on a marketplace or on a website. That's not okay. There is a blockchain protocol that bridges this gap between privacy and transparency, though. So that's why we use it. Plus, it's easy to track and trace. Then we add artificial intelligence. And how we do that is because when you want to make a match, lots of things come into play. The four things that I mentioned, like quality, quantity, timing, location, but also legal requirements, very detailed material information. And this slide gives you an example. So in the middle, you see a PET bottle, just a plastic bottle. One of the components is polyethylene, and that's also one of the components of carpets. So we make these matches and we treat everything in a network type way. So with this, we can ask the system, okay, it needs to be pink, fluffy, have this type of density, needs to come within a 100-mile radius from where we are, etc. Please go look for it. And it finds the matches much faster than any human would. So that is what we do with intelligence. And then lastly, the third I, integration. And I have two examples. One of orange peels, as you see in the back here, because we drink a lot of orange juice and then the peel is left over. And we worked with the airport in the Netherlands, for example, to see what we could do with it. And what you can do with this, you can take the orange outer layer and use it for limonene, which is a cleaning agent. So it's in cleaning stuff, detergent, soaps, etc. Then you have the white inner layer. You can use it as feed for livestock, or you can just use the whole peel for biogas production. And my question to you, that you can answer in your mind, so don't worry, is which of these three do you think is the highest value match, most sustainable match? And for us, that was a business case and environmental impact reduction. So think about it for a moment. I'll show you the answer. It is actually 1 and 2. So there's an innovative new process, at least in the Netherlands, where they managed to extract the outer orange layer from the white inner layer and use both. And this leads to a 50% reduction in cost and a 99% reduction in carbon emissions. And that is mainly because these orange peels displace a lot of soy coming from Brazil, which is very carbon intensive. So the reduction is enormous. And then another example we looked at is railroad tracks. So we work with a company in the Netherlands that is responsible for the maintenance and extension of the whole railway network in the Netherlands. And of course, they need to replace tracks. And once they get out of the track, they're sold for a scrap metal price, which is not that much. But what you could also do with that is use them as track again, but in another part of the track with lower functional requirements. You can use them as support beams in buildings which is done quite a bit in the east of the country, and as clay walls. And as you all know, we have a lot of clay walls in the Netherlands, so that's helpful. My question again to you is, which of these three do you think is the most sustainable circular match? So best financial business case and highest environmental impact reduction. And the answer is support beams. So the financial value actually increases fourfold, and the carbon emission reduction is about 80%. That's a lot. So what we've done is we did a really big pilot program, because waste these days, I mean, has a destination. It's not like it's piled up in Europe everywhere. So it's going somewhere. So we were looking with big corporates, and you might know some of the ones that you see here. For example, Philips, there's the Ministry of Infrastructure, there's the railway company, there's a construction company, there's a big chemical company. And with them, we looked at 17 material streams. So 10 companies, 17 material streams, mainly within the Netherlands. And we looked if we could find better, higher value destinations for these streams. And you see it ranges from carpets to vehicle information systems to lamps to coffee leftovers to plastic. So it's really a wide range of products. And we actually succeeded in finding higher value destinations. And with that, we created a potential 64 million euro in financial value. We saved enough energy to light the street side of Paris for 5 years. We saved enough carbon emissions of the whole population of the city of Amsterdam driving in a car to Milan. And we saved an amount of water enough to fill up 860 Olympic-sized swimming pools. This was way beyond the impact that we thought we could ever have with this. And this is just 10 companies and 17 streams. So I really hope that next time when you see trash laying around, you don't think a waste, but you think gold mine. Thank you so much for your attention and your time.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really interesting. I have one, I would like to say quick question, but perhaps it's not going to be so quick to answer. You were talking about bridging the gap between transparency and privacy and all that, but in your business case, how do you plan to bridge the gap that's in the platform business model? So how is it going to look like with the EME going past the pilots into the full market deployment and implementation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, starting a platform is always a chicken and an egg. What comes first? Which is why we started with these big companies and showing that it was possible. Then the time that we had everyone on board, COVID came along. So that was not really helpful, because what you need for this to work is a little bit of time. So we make the match. And then before it's implemented and you get the cash, there is a time window between that. But in times of COVID, especially in the beginning, cash was king, and people were not going to go for a little bit more uncertain investment that pays off maybe 6 months or a year down the line. So that is a great question that we're still struggling with. But what we're doing right now is that we know of certain streams that for sure generate a return on investment, and we work with a bit bigger companies that are able to bridge this gap in financing, and they take the majority of the money. We don't. We're working towards a percentage of the transaction fee. So yeah, that's how we're going there.
All right, well, we're hoping to see all the pilots to scale up all around Europe so that you find other 10 companies in other countries, not only the Netherlands. It might be a bit tougher in Slovakia, but you're welcome to come here. We'll be happy to have you here to try out the excess material exchange. Now, thank you very much, Maaike. Thank you for being here with us and giving the speech. And feel free to join us for the rest of the program, because next up, it's our discussion.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so this was the keynote by Maaike Emme-Damen about the circle economy in materials and in products. And next up, we have the already promised discussion. So at this point, I would like to welcome our two remote speakers in the call. It's Professor Philip McCann from Sheffield University and Alan Haig from DG Research and Innovation, if I'm not mistaken, and I truly hope I was not. So that's very good. All right. Thank you very much to be here with us. We're gonna jump straight into it with the first round of questions, and then the discussion may even derail into a nice debate. But we will start with our remote speakers. Hi, Ellen. Can you tell us who are you and what are you working on right now?
Okay, so just to check, you hear me okay? You see me okay?
We can hear you and we can see you well.
Perfect. So thank you very much for this invitation, and I must say that was a very nice introductory presentation and keynote, because one of the things it reminded me, first of all, is that this is not all about developing hard new technologies. A lot of the solution is already out there and already around us, but it's the innovation of spotting it and organizing the deployment of that. So I think that was a very nice segue into maybe what we will discuss later. But anyway, my name's Alan Haig, and I am what they call a senior expert in DG Research and Innovation. I advise the Deputy Director General for Research and Innovation, and I have been doing that. I've been in the European Commission now for almost 20 years. I was, in fact, in the British nuclear industry, so I'm an engineer by trade. But I joined the Commission back in 1999, and what is perhaps more relevant for this conference is that I have been working at the Innovation and Networks Executive Agency. So I was the head of department for Horizon 2020 at the INEA Executive Agency. And so what the INEA agency did, it was responsible for the energy and the transport parts of the Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Programme. So over the last 7 years, I think I have signed something like €6.5 billion of research grants. So I am really, I would say, familiar with what's currently going on in areas like renewable energy sources, low carbon energy, smart cities. On the transport side, it would be all of the modal transport, so aviation, waterborne, green vehicles, possibly hydrogen vehicles, and also the transport system, so urban transport, freight and logistics. So it's at that level that I've been working over the last 7 years. And of course, what we're doing right now is we're making that transition from Horizon 2020 and the work programs that many researchers are familiar with to Horizon Europe. And in fact, where we are right now and what I'm doing right now is just preparing for the formal launch of Horizon Europe. So I think many people have watched its political progress over the last 6 months through the Parliament and through the Council, and the legal basis and publication is due in the very coming days. And in fact, we hold the Research and Innovation Days hosted from here at DG Research on the 23rd and 24th of June. So anything I mention later in the discussions about Horizon Europe, that would be the opportunity to dive into the detail and the policy behind it. But for Horizon Europe, let's just summarize as it's going to be a €95 billion program centered around the 3 pillars of excellence, the thematic clusters, and then innovation. So, I mean, I'm really happy to be part of the discussion today. That's a little summary of who I am and what I'm hoping for. And I would just finish on, this is a really interesting moment to be around, I think, in research and innovation, because we have a huge recovery and resilience package that's just been launched. We're at the beginning of an MFF, which is hundreds of billions of euro worth of investment. We have the whole decarbonisation and digital agendas to achieve. And I think that's an awful lot that we have to do in a sustainable and resilient way. So I think this is a great time to be around in research, and I look forward to the discussion that we'll be having in a moment.
Thank you very much, Ellen. We will definitely talk about Horizon Europe and about all of the funds pouring into research, innovation, and then diffusion and deployment on the national level. And we will also diffuse the information about the Research and Innovation Days regarding Horizon Europe. I would like to welcome also Philip McCann, who is a professor at the Sheffield University, but also works with the Joint Research Centre on issues also regarding policy. So we have all of the funds, we have all of the money, but how are we going to prepare our member states, our agencies, our policies to use all this money? And the question is for you the same: who are you and what are you working on right now?
Well, thanks very much, Christina. I'm very pleased to be here. I was delighted to be invited to be part of this discussion. I should just say the presentation presented by Micah a few minutes ago was super interesting and actually opens up lots of other questions. And if I've just been bouncing around in my own mind over the last few minutes. My link with these issues really is around the regional development question. So for the benefit of the people who are listening into this webinar, I was a special advisor to Commissioner Johannes Hahn at the reforms of the current programming period. So the programming period that's just coming to an end now, the reforms that were built in at the start of that programming period. So I worked alongside Fabrizio Barca, many of you will know that name. So I was special advisor to Commissioner Hahn, and then I was also the Chief Independent Economic Advisor on the 6th Cohesion report. And then following that, I was also a special advisor to Commissioner Corina Crețu on the smart specialization types of issues. So I come at these questions very much in terms of the regional development challenges facing Europe. And of course, they are very, very real. And there are huge regional imbalances across Europe and also within countries as well. And some of those regional imbalances inside countries are actually accelerating, particularly in the post-crisis period. So in terms of the issues being discussed here around innovation, my focus in the last few years has been on the links between innovation, regional development, and the climate change challenge. Going back 15 years, of course, we were talking about climate change mitigation, but the links between that and the kind of regional development challenges, how we think about policy and innovation in the spatial and local context, those discussions were much less well developed. If you look in the Barker report and the documents related to that, there are various issues raised. And then in the reforms themselves, going back to between 2010 and 2013, again, these issues are raised, that there are themes and there are strands within the cohesion policy frameworks. There are obviously funding streams and strands, thematic strands, but the question of integration around this area was kind of left, not undiscussed, but it wasn't particularly comprehensive. And I think that reflects on the fact that a lot of our thinking on these issues, not just in Europe, but worldwide, was still developing, it was still evolving. And there were clear lines of direction of travel, but there were also areas that were to some extent unresolved or not clarified. And I think now we're moving to a much more urgent stage where it really demands of us to clarify those issues and to make sure how we think about climate change, mitigation issues in the context of innovation are fully embedded in all of our programs and policy settings. And so there is a new push now within various arenas within the European Commission, particularly spearheaded by the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission in Seville in Spain. And I'm working as part of that team alongside Luc Sauté. Many of you will know Luc Sauté from Belgium and the Netherlands, a very big name in innovation, again contributed to the Barker report. And there's a team of us there who are working to try to build a better integration between these agendas, the governance reforms, innovation actions at the local and the regional level, and responding to the climate change agenda, the mitigation issues. And that's really where my work is focused over recent years and hopefully over the coming years in terms of how it links to the discussions here today.
So did we lose Christina, or do you still see me and hear me?
I can see you and hear you clearly, Alan, but I can't. We lost Christina. Oh no, she's back. Christina's back. We can't hear you, Christina, but we did lose you.
Yeah, hi guys. I'm really, really sorry that this happened. You know, Zoom gets tired these days. It's been so many online events. And I will spill over the water here as well. So sorry, Philip, you froze. Well, we fell from the line a couple of perhaps minutes ago. So please finish your thought. I believe we're talking about the new push.
Yes.
Talking about climate and regional development.
Yes, so what I was saying was, for those for whom the screen froze, I think Alan and I kept communication pretty well, but I did see the part of the screen freezing. And I think, you know, we live in Zoom land nowadays, and these things happen quite often. We're aware of that. I think there's now a renewed push to think about a better integration of these issues. If I go back to the reform period that led up to the previous set of reforms for the current programming period, which is just finishing, issues around, of course, climate change, going back to the Gothenburg agenda, for example, in the early 2000s, issues around climate change, sustainability were very much on the agenda, and there are strong lines within cohesion policy around that. Of course, governance reforms and incentives to promote innovation were absolutely key to the reforms, particularly the smart specialization agenda that obviously many people are involved in. So linking places to innovation, and also the kind of climate change mitigation agenda, they were all in the reforms, but in some sense they were kind of parallel to each other. And I think actually I'll go a bit further than that. I think that's not just true of cohesion policy. If you look at the wider European set of policies, those policies sort of ran alongside each other with not a great deal of integration between them. And I think now there is a real renewed push to try to build much better integration and cohesion across these different policy arenas to bring hopefully a more holistic approach to this. And this is very much led by the European Commission Joint Research Centre down in Seville, under the leadership of Johan Steiner, Michael Landebasso, and I'm part of that team working alongside Luc Sauté, who many of you will know from Belgium and the Netherlands, has been a key leader in the innovation reform agenda across the European Union. So that's certainly where I've been in the last couple of years, and hopefully, you know, I hope to make more contributions in this area over the coming years.
Thank you very much. I also got the word from the technical background here that everybody else heard everything you were saying while we were frozen, because it was just here a problem in the studio. So, well, they got to hear it twice, so they will remember better. You were talking about regional development, about cohesion, about connecting what we do on the Brussels level, so to speak, to the member states, and to the regional level, even smaller than the member states. And to cover that perspective from the ground, we have representatives of the Slovak Innovation and Energy Agency, who are responsible for part of the diffusion deployment of the European structural and investment funds, which are those that are supposed to act the cohesion policy, bring out some regions faster than the others because of the inequalities that we have between the countries. We are at the beginning. I don't believe that we have signed the partnership agreement or partner agreement. I'm sorry if I didn't use the term correct, between the countries and the EU concerned the European structural and investment funds. But without further ado, the same question goes here to my two lovely guests in the studios, Eva Pružincová and Rastislav Milošević. So please, what are you doing and who are you?
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting us here. It's an honor for us to be part of this conference. I would like to introduce my colleague and myself. We are here on behalf of the Slovak Innovation Energy Agency, and more specifically on behalf of the Department of EU Structural Funds. The agency is a professional subsidy organization which was established by the Ministry of Economy of the Slovak Republic, and we, at the national level, we work mainly in the field of the energy sector. So our projects are focused on the energy efficiency, auditing, etc. Our agency is involved in the implementation of the operational programs Quality of Environment and Research and Innovation. I am more involved in the implementation of the EU structural funds. My colleague here, Rastio, he works in the Department of Programming, so he focuses more on preparing of calls of proposals, setting the conditions, etc. To connect our work to this conference, I would say that the low carbon economy is one of the main targets in our projects, in implementing our projects. And my colleague will tell you more about the priorities and programming and operational programs, but maybe in the second round, I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you for the word, Eva. So basically, I would like to just fill in that Slovak Innovation and Energy Agency has the history of supporting energy efficiency throughout more than one operational period. Even in the last operational period, we supported the projects of energy efficiency. Currently in operational program Quality of Environment, we supported a number of issues. I dare to say that we supported the whole package, which includes raising awareness about the energy efficiency in the public, also in the specialists in the area of energy efficiency, such as energy auditors, energy specialists, through the implementation, through the creation or support for the energy audits and support the implementation of energy efficiency measures in all areas. So it means in enterprises, in public buildings, in different types of sectors.
Thank you very much. So it seems that we have the full cycle here present. We have the European level, we have the national level, we have the policy and the regional development level as well, represented by Philip. So I believe that the following questions, everybody will have something to add, and perhaps we're going to have a very interesting discussion. And I invite everybody to use the chat function here that is called Q&A. I can see it here on my tablet, so you can ask any kind of question, and when I'm not in the heat of the debate, I can check and I can ask on your behalf. So we get to the first round, which is going to be perhaps sounding a little bit descriptive, but I believe we're going to get to the bones of the topic. So one of the key Green Deal targets that we have in front of us is the CO2 emission cut of 55% by 2030 to meet the goal of the Paris Agreement. And that goal is not to have a climate increase or the climate temperature higher than 1.5 degrees compared to the pre-industrial levels. But since 1880, we have been increasing the temperature by 0.08 degrees per decade. So if you do the quick math, you can see that we are pretty much there already. So how do the tools you are working with support this ambition, which is of course connected to decarbonization, because, well, no emissions means we have decarbonized. And we can start with Philip, because I can see his name on the screen, so I got drawn to it. So Philip, what are the tools that you are working with at the JRC, at the university? What are they doing to support the ambition of carbon-free Europe?
So the way we're thinking about these things, the team working at the Civil Joint Research Centre, the way we're thinking about it is we published a paper very recently on this on the website of the Joint Research Centre. And the paper is about the shift from what we call from S3 to S4. So smart specialization, we think of RIS3, that's the standard acronym within the European Union for smart specialization activities. And of course, the innovation agencies across Europe, including those present here, are well aware of the smart specialization agenda. So we think of the RIS3 as smart specialization, regional innovation systems for smart specialization, S3. But the difficulty is this: if you look at what was the Europe 2020 agenda, we had smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth, that in many parts of Europe at a local level, those dimensions were kind of treated as a sort of a menu. Okay, we'll do the smart stuff, and somebody else maybe can do the sustainable stuff, and the inclusive stuff, well, somebody else will do that. There was a kind of a menu way of thinking that was quite prevalent in many parts of Europe, perfectly understandable. And there's also an incentive for people to be aligned with the smart first. That's seen as the kind of best. You know, if you're doing the smart, you're sort of doing the clever stuff. And so from a signaling point of view, particularly also engaging the private sector, some of these things were kind of happening by default, really. Whereas if we think about the climate change agenda, the new EU Green Deal is serious. I mean, this is serious business, because the climate change challenges now, I mean, they are not only incredibly serious, but we've probably lost a couple of years at least in terms of responding to them, simply because of the pandemic. And it may be between 3 and 5 years that we will lose in that process. That's the United Nations fear. So the urgency of responding to the climate change agenda is greater than ever on so many dimensions. And if we think about smart, sustainable, and inclusive, then actually it suggests that a reordering of those priorities would be absolutely critical. So we've come up with the acronym, which is S4, as in the letter S and the number 4. But actually what it is it's smart for sustainable, smart for inclusive. Our argument is that related to cohesion policy in particular, that you would want to impose a structure, a directionality, such that innovative actions at the regional level would be explicitly aimed at promoting sustainability, would be explicitly aimed at promoting inclusive growth. And inclusive growth and sustainability, of course, are two sides of the same coin on so many levels. So this is how we've been thinking about it. And so we've published the papers already as discussion papers. So I hope that people would be interested in reading it. It's very detailed, but it's really saying that, you know, the kind of a menu type of approach, which is really what many people kind of have used, is really not sufficient. That it has to be a much more directional and much more logically ordered, so that any smart actions, any innovative actions at the European local scale are absolutely explicitly targeted at promoting sustainability and inclusion. So that's our basic point.
Now, you have been mentioning the regional level, so I have no other option than to turn my attention to the colleagues in the studio who are dealing exactly with this regional level. And perhaps from your experience, the original question still stands. So the tools that are at your disposal, how do you see them helping us reaching the goals of the Green Deal and the Paris Agreement, but also reflecting on the past programming period? Was it smart or sustainable or inclusive or all or both?
Thank you for the input. Well, that's a very good question. I believe that our operational program quality of environment supports or actually makes a huge leaps towards the European Green Deal. There are a number of measures that really helps to achieve this goal. For example, I might say that we support the renewable energy sources of different kinds, very interesting are the renewable energy sources for the households that are implemented by the Slovak Innovation Energy Agency through the national projects Green to Household. In fact, this national project is so successful that we are preparing the third round of this national project. Within this national project, there were maybe more than, let me check, 30,500 installation of renewable energy sources in the households. Also, we support the renewables on the higher level. Let's say we support the projects that are focused on combusting biomass by means of renovation existing energy plants that combust fossil fuels. There are a number of measures, actually. I might say that in the area of district heating and cooling, there are a number of projects that really helps to achieve in 2050 to achieve the goal of zero carbon economy. I might say that within the specific objective 431 of our operational projects, our operational program, we support the lowering energy demand in public buildings. We might say that within this specific objective and within 3 calls for proposals, we actually achieved the measuring indicator of 1,400,000 square meters of floor area of public buildings that were energy efficient above the national legislation regarding the energy efficiency. Regarding the input of Philip, thank you very much. I think that some of the projects, I'm not saying that all of them, but some of the projects doesn't look at the energy efficiency as a sustainability, but rather from the money viewpoint, so that they can achieve more and with the less money that are put into the energy that needs to be bought. So I would say that it might be partially true that some of the projects are related to the sustain or focus on sustainability, but more and more projects that are presented to us are focused on the zero carbon economy.
Thank you very much. And I also have a question relating to this, but we will pick it up later because it relates to the procedure, the steps for the upcoming applicants of EU structural programs project calls in Slovakia. We're going to deal with this perhaps a little bit later when we're gonna look at the pipeline from the idea, the technology, the innovation, and then bringing it back to the diffusion, and it is related to that. So don't worry, whoever asked the question, we will get to you. But so we have talked about the policy level and then how it is on the regional level, especially in the CEE, where the smart, inclusive, and sustainable are not as often complementary. They can be a little bit either one or the other. But now I would like to ask Alan the same question. Who are you and what you are working on right now? Because where Alan is coming from, that is the origin of the know-how, of the innovation, of the research that we are then supposed to worked into our policy so that we can instrumentalize it and use it and deploy it. So Ellen, can you tell us a little bit more about what the tools are you are working with? I'm sorry, I have asked the previous question. You must have understood that I'm asking the wrong question. But well, the question was, what are the tools that you and your organization, well, which is the European Commission and the Horizon calls, are offering to support the carbon-free ambition?
Exactly. So thank you very much for the question. Because, and I will, in a moment, just to sort of make a conversation, like pick up on something that that Philip had said a moment ago. But I mean, let's be clear: emission reduction, decarbonisation, and climate change adaptation and mitigation. These are all fundamental parts of Horizon Europe and the Horizon Europe programme. So there are many calls which are just about to be published. So we've got low carbon energy calls, low carbon industry, CCS, I think one of the things you might mention later, energy efficiency, smart cities, green aviation, green steel or clean steel, waterborne. That list is very long, but just to show the credentials of what the Commission services is doing, it's not all about Horizon Europe, because a large proportion of Horizon 2020 was also doing that. And if you remember at the beginning of 2021, the last call of Horizon 2020 was in fact the Green Deal call. And the Green Deal call was €1 billion, and it was against specific targets, all to be delivered within 5 years, and all tangible and credible in terms of what they could be delivered. So I give you just 2 examples off the top of my head. The 100 megawatt hydrolyzer to take renewable energy into hydrogen. People have been talking about going for 6 gigawatts of hydrogen for a long time, but unless you start that off moving from 10 megawatt to 50 megawatt to 100 megawatt, that just won't happen. So the Green Deal call was an opportunity to focus on that. And the other one was offshore wind to develop the renewable energy, or it was smart airports and ports, where of course you would like to develop a hydrogen economy. And these were things that were in specifically the Green Deal call. Let me just flick for a moment though onto what's new. What's new is Horizon Europe, of course, and in that you have those 3 elements. It's not all about decarbonisation and the climate agenda. We still have pillar 1, so excellence and European Research Council and Blue Skies research, and feeding the researchers in terms of human resources into the research environment. So the Marie Sklodowska-Curie fellowships will still be running even bigger and stronger than before, and I think it's important to say that. And in the 3rd pillar, the new Innovation Council, the European Innovation Council, to pick up some of these startup companies, to pick up some of these SMEs with new innovative ideas, and then really try to accelerate them into larger companies and showcase what they're doing so that they can grow and have other investors pile in. And then in some ways a replication of the grand challenges of Horizon 2020, you have the 5 clusters of Horizon Europe, and sorry, the 6 clusters of Horizon Europe. So these are the thematic clusters, including health, including digital industry, food, bioeconomy. But I think the one closest to my heart is climate, energy and transport or mobility. That's where it's really not just about the modality of is it energy or is it transport. In a way, decarbonisation is going to have a big impact on all of that. So all of those elements of the work programme and all of those 3 pillars are the elements which are being launched now in this new Horizon Europe programme. And as we said earlier, I would just encourage people, it's not the time to go into the detail of all of those calls, but to look at the work programs and to attend the info days and the research and innovation days that are coming up. But just to pick up on something that Philip had said earlier, because I'm also conscious that if you take Horizon Europe as a program which is €95 billion, and then you look at smart specialization and the regional funding that's available, and then you look at what used to be called NER 300, and is now the Innovation Fund. So these are big demonstration projects, all in the field of decarbonisation and hydrogen and the Green Deal technologies, if you like. And if you take things like the Just Transition Mechanism, again, another €17 billion programme that passed through Council just a few days ago. There are many, many elements now and different strands that are available in the different steps along the way that I think you were mentioning a few moments ago, from research through to pilot and demonstration into deployment. And all those elements are important. So Horizon Europe has two new elements, I think, which are trying to address one of the things that Philip was saying, which was in some ways against the fragmentation that's currently going on. There are many programs, and these many programs do have a risk of duplicating. So what we might be doing at national level might duplicate what we're doing at regional level, or might duplicate what we're doing at European level. And even the Innovation Fund might, to some extent, duplicate what the big demonstrators of Horizon Europe might be doing. And so one of the things that were put inside Horizon Europe was, first of all, a set of missions. So clear missions where there is a specific target, and independent of the instrument, how do we reach that target? So to pick two of the 5 missions off the top of my head, I think there should be 100 smart cities by a certain date in the future, 2030 or something. Yeah. And then the other one was I forget the second. Oh yeah, it was about healthy soils and healthy food chains, and 70% of soils being above a certain quality by a certain time period. These specific missions are independent of the instrument that is going to get there. And the hope of the mission boards is that they will indeed bring these different strands together in the terms of what is the JRC doing and what is its thinking, what is happening at national level, what is happening at regional level, and how do we fight against fragmentation, and how do we work best in a cooperative and synergistic way. The other element is the partnerships. You will remember the joint undertakings from Horizon 2020, but now there are 3 different types of partnership. There's the co-funded partnership, there's the co-program partnership, and then the institutional partnerships like the joint undertakings, where it's working very closely with industry. Can you just do a check for me? Do you hear me still? Christina, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you clearly.
I guess Philip can hear me, but maybe not everyone else can, because I have the same problem as well. But just to finish the point I was making there, those partnerships, again, are working with industry to bring the different strands together on a particular thematic target. So you've got the work program of the clusters of Horizon Europe, the normal type activities, and then you've got the missions and the partnerships, which are trying to corral the different strands that are going on across Europe against specific thematic actions. I'll pause there just to be sure that Christina is still following what I'm saying.
Hello here. We can hear you.
So did you hear me throughout then? Because I only just hear you now. Did you froze for a moment there?
Yeah, we can hear. Thank you.
So, I mean, I just think that what I was saying there are the different elements within the Horizon Europe program, but there are other programs that I think fit together along that pipeline that you were talking about towards deployment, and the missions and the partnerships in a way will help bring together those different strands, because they are not dependent on a single instrument. It's how do we bring those different instruments together to achieve the thematic aim of either the mission or the partnerships that are mentioned, and there are many types of partnerships now. So I think that in a few sentences is how Horizon Europe is going to support those Green Deal objectives, but also the missions and partnerships in a much broader sense. It's not just one program, but they all, at the heart, have those decarbonisation, Green Deal and digital objectives at their heart.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question. Now you're talking about the missions and partnerships, putting together the strand thematically, so it makes more sense, so that we can arguably get closer to the market and really deploy the technologies that we have been developing. But if you were to draw the lessons, or perhaps tell us in the previous programming period with Horizon 2020, or even the framework program 7 that we had previously, so were we successful in taking the technologies and innovations that we have developed using the EU funding to the market? Did we manage to do that?
So, I mean, there are many examples. Let me give you an example of, we looked back through the energy and transport portfolio of projects that were funded under Horizon 2020. And we did two things. We looked at those that had jumped to the marketplace, because some just jumped directly and others moved to a different stepping stone, if you like. And you could maybe try to tailor those that would fit. And the example I would give was to the Connecting Europe Facility program, where there were elements of technologies that were developed in low carbon, high tech digital solutions for bridges or tunnels or for waterborne. So the electric ferry would be one thing, big battery demonstrator ferries, and then try to deploy those on the corridors. So the electric ferry subsequently deployed on a 20-kilometer Danish commercial ferry operator, based on technology that was previously developed in the framework program, or bridge sensors and monitoring for large infrastructure. The sensors had been developed in the Horizon program, and then they were subsequently used in deployment in the CEF program. But it is true that it's quite difficult to find those good examples. And I think one of the things that maybe we will come to in a bit later is, are we successfully showcasing those elements that are successful in order that the deployment community or the industry can drag those results through to the marketplace. I wanted to give another few examples. There were some projects where they went direct to market, and that's the importance of having industry in the consortium. Industry are very good at joining a consortium because they have an idea of what they would like, and they tend to steer the project to something that could subsequently be used. So there are many theoretical, I'll give you an example of a cruise ship evacuation system. And you will remember the incident in Italy several years ago of a cruise ship that capsized. Well, shortly after that, one of these modeling and flowing of passengers on a vessel, and under certain conditions, how they might successfully leave a large vessel, that was subsequently taken up direct by industry. And one of the major cruise operators bought into the solution that had been developed. So it didn't wait for a startup mechanism or an innovation mechanism. It just jumped straight to market. But I come back to the issue of, did we do it well enough? Then I think that's a very good question. And one of the things we've launched with Horizon Europe is we've launched a thing called the Horizon Results, the results portal. And I'll give you later the correct phrase for that. But it is a portal by which all exploitable results, we encourage the coordinators of the projects to put their exploitable results on that portal, so that other industry or other programs can pick up those results and try to use them. And a similar thing happened a few years ago, which was from the European Investment Project portal, to try and encourage EU Invest to pick up any product that might have an income stream. And if it has an income stream, then you would think that EIB or InvestEU would be interested in it as a means of deploying it. And again, a portal was created there, the investment project portal. And so there are a couple of initiatives that are trying to showcase the results that are coming out of Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe projects. Whether that is happening from all of the agencies, I think that's a question which would come then in the next step. What do agencies at national level think in terms of how well they exploit their technologies that they are developing? Because I don't think it would be just in the member state in which they're generated. In a way, it should be showcased so that whoever is developing the next big deployment would be able to pick up those technologies and use them. And in that sense, the Resilience and Recovery Fund is going to wake everybody up, I think, in 1 or 2 years' time, when this finance that's coming starts to manifest itself as public procurement, and everybody will be looking to procure the latest technologies. So are we doing enough to feed that with the results of national, regional, and formal framework programs? So maybe I put too many elements in that question, but I think I answered your question.
You have definitely answered my question, and you have given me a couple of new ones. Public procurement is something that we're going to touch upon very shortly, because we have the SIEA, Slovak Innovation Energy Agency representatives here that are dealing with it, and perhaps it's going to be a Central European perspective, but it's a perspective that is a little bit radical in a sense. It's not the public procurement as we perhaps know it from Sweden or France. We're going to get to that. Also an interesting thing, and I will just throw it out there, and whoever of you discussing people or the audience people will want to touch upon that, just let me know. We have been talking about the technologies, about the results of the Horizon and other European funding programs that are tangible, technological, innovative in this way, but we also have results that are perhaps dealing with social sciences, with the behaviors, something that cannot be commercialized because it is not a product. It's perhaps more a policy framework or a paradigm shift in thinking. So this brings me to the second part of the questions, and you have already touched upon it and we have talked about it, and it is the gaps or roadblocks between research, then innovation and diffusion and deployment. And I will turn my attention now to Philip to perhaps tell us where does he perceive these roadblocks coming from the regional development area, coming from the policy area. Is this path between different TRL levels, so to speak, of development of European technology, bringing it to the market and innovating our countries with it. From your perspective, is it clear enough? Do we have roadblocks? Where do we have them? And then the same questions to everybody else.
Well, actually, that's a great question, because the work that we've been doing with the Joint Research Centre that I referred to earlier, actually the whole logic and rationale for this work was exactly the issue that you've just raised. So the way to think about it from our perspective was this. Climate change obviously poses tremendous challenges and risks for all of us. So of course, that is why climate change mitigation and the development of sustainable responses is so critical. The difficulty is that climate mitigation responses themselves often adversely affect weaker places more significantly. And this is something we've seen in many, many parts of the world, that the transitions involved in adapting to the proper climate mitigation strategies is often more difficult for economically weaker places because of the mix of industries they have, the mix of skills, the technologies they use, and so on. And it's often easier, those transitions are often easier for the places which are already more prosperous. And this is true for countries, but it's also true inside countries, different cities, different regions. Places which are more prosperous are often in a stronger position to build on these new technologies of adaptation. So the danger is you actually get a widening of experiences, a greater disparity between the places which are better able to respond and those which are more threatened. Now, we've seen this, of course, particularly in the United States, a lot of places in the Midwest, which tend to be much more dependent on coal-fired production, heavy engineering, manufacturing. There's huge political pressure to slow down a lot of climate change responses. You see the same things in Australia, for example. And of course, across Europe, we have a lot of similar patterns. Now, why is this important? The importance about this is because of the empowerment of people, the incentives to engage with climate change mitigation strategies and the importance of empowerment, that people can take ownership of those strategies and drive them themselves. This is absolutely critical, getting those incentives correctly in line with each other so that people in different situations all have an incentive to engage with these processes. That is critical for the Green Deal to work. What you cannot have are just superstar firms and superstar cities or regions taking up these challenges and leaving everyone else behind. It will never work. It's impossible. What you need is a great deal of progress, even if it's small steps forward, but on a very wide range of fronts. That's how the response has to be. So it's really inclusive in the really most fundamental sense, and sustainable in the most fundamental sense. It has to be something which is participatory. What that means is everyone is able to engage, everyone is able to participate, but the incentives in political and policy structures have to be correctly developed to make sure that that is the case. And this is a problem. So if you think about it this way, if you think about new technologies, smart technologies, big data, artificial intelligence, the private sector, which is driving these technologies, naturally will be inclined to cooperate or to set up partnerships with areas which are already successful, which have large levels of research and innovation and large levels of human capital, because they are much more likely to successfully implement these strategies using these technologies. The difficulty in Europe is we need those private sector players to be just as incentivized to engage with weaker regions and localities. Otherwise, what will happen is the divides in Europe will actually accelerate, and that is not sustainable or inclusive. So our thinking in terms of moving from S3 to S4 is precisely for this reason. And that's where cohesion policy becomes so important. In the previous programming period, or the programming period we're coming to the end of, there was a great deal of work, and I really welcome the comments by Alan, because there's been such a push to link programs and initiatives across the different thematic areas, also within the European Commission, across the different directorates, the different, whether it's DG RTD, DG Enterprise, the Horizon programs, is to build a much more cohesive and inclusive platform that communities, individuals, institutions, countries, communities locally can all engage with in a broader sense. And cohesion policy, of course, is very, very important here because it's so large. Cohesion policy is pretty much the biggest policy domain of the European Union. And at the same time, of course, it's focused on places which are economically weaker. So it's the ideal candidate to be central to the Green Initiative. And so all of the learning that's taken place in the last programming period around regional innovation, exactly as your colleagues in the studio are working on and deploying, what we need to do is to step up and deploy that learning even greater in the form of smart technologies, smart innovations, but in the service of promoting sustainability, in the service of promoting inclusiveness. And the weighting of cohesion policy, which is very much in terms of the funding shares towards the weaker regions, is ideally placed to facilitate that process so that it becomes a genuine European-wide agenda. Rather than something which is articulated from Brussels, it's something which is driven by regions in Romania, Slovakia, regions in Spain, Italy, and so on. That's precisely what you would want to see, because then it allows Europe as a whole to move forward. Large progress is made by small steps on a very wide range of fronts, rather than a few flagship big hits. That's really critical. We know that from all of the climate change experience worldwide. And so a lot of the things which have been built into the cohesion policy reforms in the current period are ideally situated now to scale up, and particularly the smart specialization agenda, which the innovation agencies and regional innovation actors across Europe have been driving. That is ideally positioned because it's about localities, it's about getting local people involved, local businesses, local actors, each identifying where they can make advances, where they can make small steps to push the sustainability agenda forward, to push the inclusiveness agenda forward. It's all about this participation, and they are ideally situated. So in terms of the this is why we go back to this logic. Rather than smart, sustainable, inclusive, what you want is smart for sustainable, smart for inclusive. A very strong logic there will give a very strong directionality so that policy initiatives which are being developed at the local level have a clear direction of travel. And that's the way to, what we argue is to embed the Green Deal across the whole of Europe is by getting everybody locally and regionally to do that. And of course, as we've already heard from your colleagues in the studio, I mean, a lot of this has already been taking place in the previous 6-7 years. We know that. It's just an ideal opportunity to scale that up now, to build that up further. So that's very much the thinking of the team down in Seville in the Joint Research Center.
Basically, it's great to have 100 smart cities, but it's perhaps better to have 10,000 sort of smart villages everywhere. And so we're seeing Horizon Europe, perhaps that is exactly its role, to have big, I mean, perhaps even say expensive demonstrator projects, but then we need to see the clear path how this demonstration doesn't just stay there, perhaps becoming a competitive advantage to some private companies, but to see it trickle down and perhaps being showcased, as Alan was saying. Do we showcase enough to the local level so that we can pick it up on this local level? But now I'm going to ask the implementers, the diffusers, the deployers, the people who are working with it. How does it work perhaps in reality? Because we have talked previously, and something that Philip has mentioned, we don't need flagships, we need hundreds of smaller impactful projects. It's what Rasti, you have told me before in a private conversation, so we try to recreate it here now. But perhaps if you could run us through, how does it look like when you're implementing? What are the criteria? What are the roadblocks? If you see this big technology developed in the Horizon Europe scale, say a hydrolyzer, and now you're giving funds to perhaps bring it to Slovakia, can you do it? How would you do it? How do you do it?
Thank you. Well, basically it depends what our targets are. If our target is to create the flagship, or if our target is to achieve the carbon-free Europe in 2050.
That's the target.
Well, if that's the target, I dare to say that I 100% agree with the Philip, because we need to do the small steps. And every small step actually adds up and creates the big impact. So it's the similar as we implementing the our projects. So basically in our projects there is a certain amount of money or funds that we can provide for the projects, but within this project, there is always the question how we can get the most from this money or from these funds, and basically we implement the project on the principle value for money. So we always, or the recipient of the funds always ask themselves how can they achieve the highest volume of energy savings related to the money or funds we provide them.
Mm-hmm. And the question of public procurement, that is perhaps the limiting factor in what innovative new technology we want to deploy on the local level.
Well, with public procurement, there are different issues. One of them is that the new technology that hasn't been introduced to the market is very hard to evaluate. Very hard to evaluate whether the principal value for money is actually achieved.
Yes.
I can add from the implementation point of view that the public procurement is, as you said, is quite limiting in the implementation of our projects.
So if we have a great technology that has been developed and it's not a huge flagship one, but perhaps it's one held by a startup someplace in Europe, the road from that technology somewhere in France to the public procurement in France, it's not direct, it's not obvious. Do you have a resource where you can go and look for these technologies so that you can then guide the recipients of the funds to say, well, there are other options, there's other companies you can ask, or we deal with our local sandbox that we have here?
Well, basically, when we set the conditions for the call for the proposal, we always look around the world for the technology that is similar to our projects that are being presented to us. So basically, we set some kind of value for money principle we apply. So let's say we have the biomass plant that is a plant that combusts biomass, and we compare it for the price of the similar plant which is built, let's say, in France, in China, in Italy, or elsewhere. And on this price of the products, we sell the limiting point, or we set the limiting point of support.
Christina, could I come in on
Yes, definitely.
To pick up on two of the things that were just said a moment ago. I mean, I hope I didn't tell the story that the Horizon Europe program is all about only the big demonstrators and getting the big demonstration step. I mean, for sure we have learned the lesson in the past that a lot of research gets to TRL 6, 7, 8, and then it doesn't make the jump into the market because the first risky deployment people are reluctant to take. So the EIB will take something if there is an income stream. But if you're the very first to build an offshore wind program, then that's a very expensive mistake to make if you do it wrong. And so I think there is a place for the big demonstrator, if you like. So the big hydrolyzer that will move us faster than normal, or offshore wind is a good example. But we're not in Horizon Europe squeezing out the lower TRL or the smaller project. If you look at the number of projects in Horizon 2020, then by no means the projects were 10, 20 million euro. The projects were more like 5, 6, 7 million euro, or 2, 3, 4 if they were developing something at low TRL. And that's why it's important to have all the steps in the TRL chain. So you get the European Research Council really looking at the blue skies, low TRL 1 and 2. Just, graphene was created without really a purpose. It was just exploited to see what could be done, and people are still working in that domain. And then the mid TRL, even when you develop a big demonstrator, it tends to generate problems that need to be solved by research and innovation. So as wind turbines have got bigger and bigger and bigger, you see that they didn't just get higher and more powerful, but the magnets got lighter, and the surface of the blades got different material to make the airflow across it like a golf ball, or that the shape of the blades on a wind turbine changed so that they don't get faster and faster. At a certain moment, they generate vortexes that slow them down. And so all of this is technology that's constantly developing. And so I think it is important to have all of the stepping stones along the whole of the chain. But because Horizon Europe has got bigger than Horizon 2020, there is just bigger scope for the big deployment. And I think you see that in the research, in the resilience and the recovery package, that people want to deploy hydrogen and replace all their buses with hydrogen buses. That's an expensive business. It's not trying to squeeze out research further down the chain. A second point, if I may, was to touch on something that Philippa said, which was about citizen engagement. And I think when you read into the missions of Horizon Europe, citizen engagement is seen as one of the really key elements in choosing the missions in the first place, but also in the governance of the missions. If you don't have a societal shift, we can't just replace the technologies we have now with low carbon technologies and hope that that will solve our sustainability. As our keynote speaker said, the more waste you generate, that's more and more mining you're doing in a dead end. At a certain moment, it has to become circular and it has to have the citizen engaging. So there will be a shift in time away from private ownership of vehicles to mobility as a service or shared services, urban transport, or even away from car ownership in an urban environment to more cycling and scooters and walking. So these shifts, we may well all learn from the pandemic to fly less and do less business miles. These are societal shifts that I think we have to try and grab hold of. So these elements, we've tried to bring them in the consultation progress of the missions, and we will see how that grows throughout Horizon Europe. That is certainly not a closed chapter at this stage.
Thank you very much. Philip, do you have a reaction or?
Yes, actually, I mean, I hope also I didn't give the wrong impression. I'm completely in agreement with what Alan said. I mean, there are many environmental, energy-related, climate change mitigation actions which require huge resources. I mean, these are massive technological shifts, and the infrastructure costs and the production costs, the thresholds required that you've got to get over to make these viable are obviously enormous. So the funding that comes through the European programs, including the Horizon programs, is absolutely critical. I agree absolutely entirely. I think where we're coming from in terms of our work at the Seville Joint Research Centre is that this line of thinking just needs to be more embedded across more ways of implementing or thinking about regional development. That's the key thing, is to make sure that, you know, from the very big actions which tend to be capital intensive right down to very local community-based actions, those things just need to be stepped up. You need a greater prioritization, and the cohesion funds, the structural investment funds are just an ideal vehicle to do that, given that we've already had so much learning over the current programming period, the implementation of smart specialization. You know, it's a big shift in culture of how people do business. And so this is ideally situated to complement and to drive forward a lot of these sustainability and inclusiveness related actions. And I go back to the first point I made. You know, the Europe 2020 agenda, there were many cases where people kind of conceptually thought of these things as a kind of a menu. And it's to move away from that, really strongly away from that menu thinking to a clear focus in terms of directionality and logic, so that all innovation related actions, entrepreneurship and innovation related actions should be, you know, if they're going to receive regional development funding from the European Union, should be squarely targeted on the climate change and inclusiveness challenges. So that becomes just central. And, you know, in that sense, then lots of small actions in lots of small villages and towns and cities across Europe will entirely complement and also be complemented by the kind of issues that Alan's raising. This is exactly what you want to see. So, you know, a much more systematic way of thinking about this. Our argument is the cohesion funds are just ideally situated to do that, but it just needs to be much more deeply embedded now. That's because the scale of the challenge we're facing is so enormous and so urgent. So that urgency has to also be built in to how we think about the deployment of those funding policy schemes.
Thank you very much. Rasti, did you have something to add?
I would just like to add that I totally agree that we must have the projects which are flagships, and also the projects that are contributing to the energy efficiency in the small funds, small scale. So I totally agree that the portfolio must be diversified for the flagships projects and also for the projects that are basically the current on the market right now.
All right, so we have a consensus here, and we can move to the last question because the time is running short, and that is sort of bringing it back to the audience we have here, which are the innovation agencies, and it's the innovation agencies of the EU member states, and they are all very varied. They have slightly different agendas, but coming back to them, who should be or who can act as the relay between the innovation actions and the Horizon Europe and the flagships and the smaller projects as well, and the local levels? And of course, when I say who should do this job, I of course mean that it should be the innovation agencies. But perhaps from your perspective, Alan and Philip, how do you see their role? What should they do? What could they do? What can you, from your position and your organization, help them do better? So perhaps Alan can start.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I mean, having just been the head of department at one of the executive agencies of the Commission, I'm a big fan of agencies, and I really think you get a lot by having this idea of expertise in project management, expertise in knowing what can be delivered and what can't be delivered. And I think, just as a fundamental, that knowledge sort of enriches the evaluation process somehow, because those things which are just way over ambitious or really are not very innovative, the people who have been dealing with a portfolio of projects over a number of years, they have those project management skills and have that sort of expertise and can select expertise to come with a really good cohort of projects to move forward. Because as we know, this sort of funding is always competitive funding. And so I think agencies are good at that. In terms of exploitation, I think that agencies have to develop two particular skills. One is identifying where you see a gap in what should be being done and feed that efficiently back to your policymakers. So feedback to policy in the pure policy element of what's being done well and what's not being done well and what's the natural next step in the pipeline. You as an agency can't always solve those issues, but often you're hanging from a government department or a policy making cohort where you can feed that. So I think efficient feedback to policy is one thing. And then the second is when you do see a good exploitation potential, showcasing that effectively. And we did mention a few moments ago this whole showcasing concept. I think it is important that that we think about what is the end point for the technologies that we're generating? Because when you do see something good that's not being picked up by the marketplace, how could we perhaps be more effective? It does raise the question to some extent, why would we only ever showcase our own projects? And so if I go back to the INEA agency where I was, all of the projects that we had running in the portfolio are available on the websites. And in the CORDIS website of the Commission, the whole of FP7 and Horizon 2020 projects and their exploitable results, there's a 1 or 2 pager on each of those. So you can go back and search thematically to see what has been developed and how they will be and how they could be exploited and whether anybody is indeed exploiting them. That's the sort of thing that is useful if you're in an agency, because you care at the project level and you care at the thematic area. And I just have to be transparent at that stage and say it is clear in the Commission thinking that the way it runs its agencies is in a thematic sense. They tend not to be fully horizontal. So you have the climate, transport and energy thematic agency, SIEA, and then you have the health and the digital health support, so the HEDEA agency, and then you have the young researchers, what use the research executive agency for Marie Curie Actions, and then you have the European Research Council, European Innovation Council. They tend to be thematic. That was a lesson that was learned in the end of FP7 and in Horizon 2020, that thematic clustering enables you to see where many of the thematic areas overlap. And we talked in a couple of examples earlier about biofuels, that whether biofuel is an energy source or is a transport solution, it just doesn't matter. There's a whole chain there where you need to produce the energy technology, you need to develop the chemistry, you need to exploit it, and then you need to develop a market who will use it, whether it's kerosene or for vehicles. And so it's all parts of the same, or two sides of the same coin, or multiple parts of the same problem. So I think agencies bring an awful lot to that. Perhaps the question mark I leave is, do we exploit the results that we generate ourselves as efficiently as we could? And whether there is some means by which a common forum could be developed where exploitable results could be showcased, whether it's in conference form or on website form, I think that's a good question for the future. It's a good take home for people to reflect on.
Thank you very much. So that would be for agencies. Feedback to policymakers is one of the tasks or roles that you could fulfill. And then, of course, with help of Brussels and research and innovative schemes, you can showcase and you can help to have these solutions showcased. Philip, what do you think? What is the role of agencies as a relay?
Well, firstly, I agree with everything that Alan said. Secondly, with the particular focus on regional development and local development, so the Cohesion structural investment funds, two elements. Firstly, one of the key dimensions of the smart specialization RIS3 agenda over the last 7 or 8 years has been the building of a repository of knowledge, which is shared. That's actually the RIS3 platform, which is hosted by the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission in Seville. And most of the innovation agencies are very active in that arena, and that's designed to share actions and interventions, to share experiences. Localities help each other in the design and development of programs. So a lot of learning processes, policy transfer, all of that is taking place. So very much at the local and the regional level, there is already an initiative, an institution set up to do precisely this. And there are hundreds and hundreds of localities and regions actively involved in the RIS3 platform. So, so in terms of the issues I've been raising, absolutely agree with all of these points, and that these things can be leveraged up. I think the other area where I think the innovation agencies are really critical, particularly working at the regional levels, not just the national level, but also the links down to the regional and the local level, is that they can build this learning and capability and coordination roles, exactly as Alan has said. That's really critical. In addition, the other critical role that they can play is to bring outsiders inside the system. Innovation agencies are ideally situated to make sure that as many people as possible, as many stakeholders, companies, entrepreneurs, risk takers, institutions, as many people as possible can be engaged with these processes. So that the idea of using the kind of cohesion policy approach to drive and prioritize the EU Green Deal is also to make sure that is this participation idea that all places, all localities are involved in the challenge. That's really critical. But you also need that at the local and the regional level. And innovation agencies can facilitate that, keeping the processes open. So you don't get the usual suspects, the same people all the time, gaining the funds, gaining the projects, winning the policies, and kind of directing. What you don't want is to develop, in effect, local monopoly positions. That's not what you want. You want competition for ideas, competition for different networks, competition. That's what innovation is all about. It's also about competition. So it's opening up the arena so as many participants have got a chance to get engaged. So, young people coming out of university who've got a really good idea for a startup or an SME, or they've got ideas to develop new technologies, locally based technologies. This is crucial. And the innovation agencies are in a really important role to keep that spread, that portfolio of ideas very broad, so new people are coming into the system all the time. So you don't develop any kind of insider-outsider relationships. What you're developing all the time is new ideas, new people entering the system. And that's really important to be done at the local level, because the innovation agencies are best placed to do that. So what we think of at the European-wide level, also at the local regional level, that's really critical here. And of course, that's very much what the inclusive story is all about.
Thank you very much. And I will close the round with, of course, the innovation agency sitting right here. Very shortly, everything that was told, where do you see yourselves, in this case, you as the representatives of Slovak Innovation and Energy Agency, where do you think you will move as an organization, talking about cohesion, feedbacking to policy, opening gates for young entrepreneurs and innovators, bringing in competition, regional development, and regional voices?
Well, as I said earlier, Slovak Innovation and Energy Agency has been implementing the energy projects within two operational programs, as for now, it's very hard to say that we will continue, because there hasn't been any sure competencies in the future programming period, who is what subject is going to do energy efficiency. We hope that it's going to be Slovak Innovation and Energy Agency. However, there is the recovery plan that has been approved by the government of Slovak Republic, and this is going to be implemented, we suppose, by Ministry of Economy. So it's very hard to say whether or not we will continue with energy efficiency in the future. We hope that we will, and we set our goal into achieving the energy efficiency in all areas as for now, and more inclusive. So we would like to get more innovative ideas, connect different subjects, whether there would be entrepreneurs or other subjects from the third sectors. So we would like to get the projects which would be more comprehensive.
I would like to shortly add that, as my colleague said, that we hope that we are going to be the implementation agency for the next programming period. And hopefully we can learn lessons from what was said here, and we can, do better in the future and next programming period.
Thank you very much. In any case, you will be in touch, or you can be in touch with Philip McCann. Thank you very much, Philip. And
it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And also you can be in touch with Alan Haig.
Yes,
thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much for your participation and your lively comments. And if I can do my two plugs, one is that the info days for the Horizon Europe launch is between the 28th of June and the 9th of July. So for the Green Deal actions, it's the 5th and 6th of July. And of course, on the 23, 24 of June are the R&I days, where the whole package is launched. So they are good webinar dates if you wanted to passively listen into the calls that you're particularly interested in. And thank you very much for a very lively discussion there. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for being here with us. And thank you, Eva Pružintová and Rastislav Milošević from Slovak Innovation and Energy Agency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now I'm sorry for keeping you a little bit longer. It's been 8 minutes over time, but we're gonna have a 5-minute break so you can, walk a little bit because you've been sitting down for a bit. And then we're gonna come back and we're gonna hear from Martin Hojsík, member of the European Parliament, talking about decarbonization in the European Union. See you in a minute. Well, 5. Welcome back after this short break, and what we have prepared now is a pre-recorded interview with the Slovak member of European Parliament, Mr. Martin Hojsík. It was recorded last week when he was visiting Slovakia, and it was recorded in the beautiful presidential garden. So 15 minutes of interview about decarbonization in Europe.
Martin Hojsík is an elected member of the European Parliament of Slovakia since 2019. He is a founder and member of the board of Progressive Slovakia and sits with the Renew Europe group in the European Parliament. He is a member of the ENVI committee and focuses on climate policies and fights against hazardous chemicals. He is a vice chair on the committee on the protection of animals during transport and a member of committees on budget and industry and energy. Martin has long-standing experience in matters of environmental protection and climate change. Over the past 25 years, he has worked in a number of international organizations. He was also a member of the board of 4 Paws International, where he led a program on animal protection. For many years, Martin worked for Greenpeace, where he led national and international campaigns against toxic substances and waste. He remains the main environmental expert in Progressive Slovakia. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you very much.
Is Europe a leader in carbon-free strategies?
Well, we are leader in what we say. We are leader in ambition. So yes, we are really good in strategy and planning, and I think we have world-class climate diplomacy. This is also very important because we don't want to be alone. Ultimately, we need to get as a planet carbon neutral. What I think we need to do more is actually turning these strategies into practice, maintaining the ambition on the ground and creating space for innovators and entrepreneurs actually to come up with new technologies, help them not only to create them, but to also scale them up. We need specifically more support for kind of scaling up and on the level of the venture capital style financing for new technologies that can maintain the European competitiveness and edge also in the green technologies.
What steps have been taken to fulfill these plans? And briefly, what is the current EU strategy for the next few years to achieve the goal of carbon neutrality in 2050?
I hope it's going to be earlier than 2050. We actually are on a very tight schedule because there is not much carbon left that we can release into the atmosphere. And on this level, there was an important step of the agreement on the European climate law, which provides kind of the big framework. But what is going to be crucial now is the Fit for 55 package. So the laws, the proposals for laws that the Commission is coming up on 14 July with, and we're going to have a very intensive discussions in Parliament, and I'm very much sure that also with the Council about Renewable Energy Directive, the new version of it, about energy taxation, about energy efficiency directive, but also about the vehicle emission standards, carbon border adjustment mechanism, and others, ETS, which are providing the more detailed and therefore very crucial legal framework for the green transition.
How much innovation do we need to achieve the goals of carbon neutrality to decelerate carbon changes or protect the environment in general?
We need lots of innovation, although we have also a lot of things available. But I always say, no one is perfect, nothing is perfect, and I kind of always try for more progress to make things better. So I don't see an end to innovation. This is, I think, an incredibly beautiful playground where we have to be careful though. We have to be careful that we make sure that the innovation is actually not leading us on the wrong path, that we have policy coherence, that we, by trying to do one thing, don't destroy the other, that we, at the end of the day, are very clear that we have to live within the planetary boundaries that we have. This amazing planet is limited, and we have to acknowledge that. And I think for me, the objective of the innovation is to be able to give back to the planet more than we're taking. Right now, we're taking way more than we actually should be able to get from the planet.
What do you see as the biggest opportunity for innovation agencies that want to support energy and renewables?
One thing that's going to be important is the energy efficiency. Now, it might sound a bit too profound, but really, the best energy that you have is the one that you don't need. I regard myself as a bit lazy person, and honestly, the best energy is laying on the couch or on a meadow in the middle of forest. But this is something where we have incredible potential, and I think that should be the first focus. But then, of course, we still need some energy. I need some energy to get to the meadow in the forest, to lay there and enjoy myself. And that's where we need to look at renewables all across the board. And that means not only in the classical energy production, this is also about utilizing renewables in industry, kind of how we combine it, but also very importantly, looking at renewables from a perspective of a circular economy. Now, it might sound a bit far away from classical kind of energy innovations, but I think it's very important to realize that we need to make our economy circular, because ultimately that helps to reduce carbon emissions as well. That deals also with the problems of plastic waste, toxic substances, and we need innovation that creates win-win effects.
How did the pandemic influence the plans for carbon neutrality in the European Union? And how will the recovery and resilient plan of the EU shape our greener, more digital, and more resilient Europe?
Now, the pandemic was a warning sign. When we were sitting down with kind of the scientists in the Environment Committee of the European Parliament, they warned us that if we don't change the course, it's not only about the climate crisis, it's about the age of pandemics. We all kind of reflect and look back on and hopefully see COVID passing. But if you look at, for example, Ebola, it's coming more frequently. If you look at a number of other diseases, luckily nothing was recently so big as the corona, but we have emergence of new diseases. This is due to climate change. This is due to our destruction of biodiversity. This is due to the fact we treat the planet. And I really hope, and I think this is something which the Next Generation EU plan is reflecting to a large extent. I really hope that we are finally starting to learn from this. And that's where it's great to see. And I'm happy that I've had the chance to be part of the group which pushed for green recovery. If you look back at the financial crisis, there was lots of public money invested into helping economy with no green strings attached. Now it's different, and this is very important realization. And also what I think we learn is that we need to take people along. This is not about the green transition only, this is also about the just transition. The justice needs to be there for the planet and for the people alike. And we need to make sure that not only the money that we allocate, so to say, for the green transition is from the recovery package is used in a green way, but also we have a policy coherence. I always say, left hand needs to know what the right hand is doing, and therefore we need to really diligently watch the do no significant harm principle. So the entire spending need to be in line and not cause environmental damage.
How do you see the EU with regard to a greener, innovative digital future in the next 5 to 10 years? And can we expect massive changes?
I'm hopeful and I expect massive changes. And the interesting thing about it is, though, that, this is something where what we saw is not, and what we will see is not only because we are trying to save the climate, save the planet. This is, in a way, also one of the results of the innovation, and we will see very likely big disruptions. And I'm hoping, in a positive, because if you look at it, the move from horsepower to cars was a big disruption. If the move and kind of the ascent of smartphones was a big disruption. Most of the people, you know, you don't go to bank, you bank on your smartphone. It not just destroyed certain industries, it created a completely new ones. And this is where Europe comes in. We know that we will have a disruption in mobility. We know that we will have a disruption in the circular economy. We know that we will have a disruption in the energy sector. And let's be honest, they will come anyway. Globally, the progress in terms of innovation is happening. The data is a bit old, but you know, from the 350,000 electric buses in the world at the beginning of 2019, 300,000 were, guess where? In China. Europe, in a number of ways, innovation needs to speed up. We need to be at the forefront. And I think this is where we need to set up as legislators the right framework to enable it. You know, it's not me who is doing the innovation. I see my job as making sure that there is the right legal frame and also there are the right tools in terms of access to money that will give people the possibilities. And they will not let the weakest one, those ones which are most vulnerable, alone, forgotten. And this balance we need to strive, innovation and social justice.
Are member states doing enough to support and implement the EU carbon-free plans?
And not yet. There are member states which are more ambitious, which are ahead. Sadly, the former Soviet bloc, including Slovakia, is yet to realize the opportunity. It's seen as something like, okay, you know, we have to catch up. This is an opportunity for us not to catch up with where the western part of the EU was 10 years ago. This is an opportunity to leapfrog. And I think this is something which we finally need to get. I hope that there is going to be enough pressure also on the governments, because governments are co-deciding and they are sometimes trying to hold back certain things on the European level. Whereas I believe it's in the best interest of the citizens of Slovakia and all the countries to actually utilize this opportunity, to see this as something which can make people's lives better. And if we don't use it, we will lose, not only as Slovakia, but as Europe, and we cannot afford that.
How can the EU put more pressure on the member states to implement its strategies?
I think what is important is not just to talk about it, but I think it's important to own it, engage public, engage entrepreneurs, engage innovators. That's why for me, it's always very interesting. I'm trying to do it is to bring the innovators from Slovakia to Brussels. Now it's online, but still it's really good. And it's been very appreciated by both sides to actually give them the platform to talk about the amazing things they're coming up with. Because sadly, what you hear often from governments in the former Soviet bloc is, oh no, don't be too hard on us. And then when you talk to the entrepreneurs and innovators, like, look, just, you know, don't even give us money. It's like, give us opportunity to deliver. We are ready, so don't hold us back. And I think this is something where the dialogue and bringing things closer to the people, not in a way that you tell them what to do, but you engage them, that is the crucial way. For Europe, for Slovakia, I think engagement is really important.
What do you see as the biggest opportunities for innovation agencies that want to support energies and renewables? And what projects should they first focus on?
It's on two levels. It depends on which stage of development you are. There is going to be, of course, kind of the short-term picking of low-hanging fruits. That's where the renovation wave is going to be important. And there, I think it's really great to see the initiative of the new European Bauhaus, because it's not about, so to say, plastering houses with polystyrene. It's really about having proper deep renovations, utilizing both the energy savings, but also the renewable potentials, and bring beauty. I believe that beauty needs to be important part of this, needs to be important part of innovation. You know, let's be honest, if you look at one unnamed company with a fruit in the logo, it's integral part of their success. It's not just that the products are innovative. Actually, you can dispute how innovative they are, but they combine the innovation with beauty. And that, I think, something which engages, but which excites people. Second thing is to start looking at the hard nuts to crack. This is something where, you know, it's going to take time. There are things like, we have a problem. Cement production is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions, and we need to figure out how we will build in the future without emissions. It might be that we figure out how to make cement without emissions, or we might figure out something completely else, something which we haven't even thought that it might be possible. We might be printing houses, who knows? And this is an exciting opportunity to look, and I think this is where maybe also now the innovation agencies need to start thinking and identifying those, what are the hardest nuts to crack, and not thinking outside of the box, forget that there is any box. Because who would think 20 years ago that you would have in a mobile phone everything? You couldn't really imagine this. And we have to now create the things that we haven't been even able to imagine.
Martin, thank you very much for your time.
So this was Martin Hojsík, member of the European Parliament, talking about, among other things, how innovation needs to meet beauty for real success. And right now we're going to continue on our innovation safari that we have started in February and then in April with two Slovak companies. First up is Otto Pisoň from Inobat, quite a unique Slovak project that is going to develop and then build batteries for e-mobility. Otto, do you hear me?
Loud and clear, Christina. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So go ahead and present what Inobat is all about.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Also, sorry for not being able to record such a nice recording as Mr. Hojsík had. I missed it. It's my fault. However, before I start presenting, I think I have around like 7 to 10 minutes, but I would just like to react on many things that he said. I mean, he touched upon mobility. Yeah, and it's a very important thing actually. And I mean, there are many skeptical people about electric mobility and what it brings and whether it's greener or not. Nevertheless, many of the data shows that it actually is much greener. Maybe the electric vehicle, when it comes out of the production line and it's a battery electric vehicle, it has a higher footprint than a combustion engine car. But throughout its lifetime and driving distances and the kilometers driven, you then shave off of this disadvantage that the electric vehicle has in its beginnings. And it also depends on the energy mix of the country where you are driving it. So just like a very quick note, I mean, the US have done a quite rigorous research, and it has shown that if you are driving a small electric vehicle, let's say in a state that has green energy, then actually within 1 year, the electric vehicle is already greener than its combustion engine counterpart. And in terms of larger vehicles, let's say you have an electric SUV that like changes like 3 or 4 years. And even in worst case scenarios, actually the combustion, so even in worst case scenarios for electric mobility, it's not the combustion engine car that is the cleanest, but it would be a hybrid or plug-in hybrid vehicle. So we are a company that really thinks that electric mobility is going to be the future, and this is how we are going to supply the batteries to fulfill the needs of the OEMs. So I'm just going to share my screen. I'll just reconfirm if you can see it. Hopefully you can all see it. So I'll just quickly start with the presentation. So we are a very young company, started in Q4 2019. How we differentiate ourselves from actually our competitors, which currently in the EU are mostly Asian ones. That I mean, these large companies, they are more catalog driven, and we're not. So we want to make a tailor-made product that fits the exact needs of our customers. It's quite a challenging thing to do, but it's a technologically advanced thing to do. We use our AI capabilities or AI capabilities of our development partners and high throughput production technology by Wildcat Discovery Technologies. They're based in San Diego, and we cooperate with them heavily on developing our batteries. What we want to do is to support this European technology development in electric mobility. As said before, I mean, as Europe was lagging a bit behind on battery technologies, but wanted to have electric mobility, this opened doors to many Asian suppliers, which are a huge part of facilitation of electric mobility in Europe. Nevertheless, if this trend would continue, we would be left with BMWs and Mercedes and all the premium European cars driving on mostly Chinese and Korean batteries. And as that is going to be one of the most valuable components of a vehicle, that would really change maybe product perception in the future. So this is why it's important to have European batteries. And as I mentioned, we are reducing the carbon footprint by a lot. This is how we approach it. The market is rising. Based on several calculations and analysis, and this is the numbers that you see there, that's not only connected to passenger cars. Electric mobility is a much broader topic than just passenger cars. Actually, the demand after batteries should rise like 17-fold. So this is like mobility batteries, not stationary storage. And even with all the announced gigafactories that should be in Europe, we are expecting a market gap for the supply of like approximately 70 to 120 gigawatt hours. How we want to fill in this kind of like gap is this high throughput method that I mentioned, that I just wanted to put this extra slide there so that I can better explain what it is. So generally, researchers approach battery development in a way that they, plan for a certain type of chemistry. They synthesize a single material, then assemble a sample small 2 ampere cell, which then they test, and then they have results. How the HTP, the high throughput process, helps us is actually that we can do this at a much larger scale as AI is involved, and the database of our research partner is also involved in it, and we can very easily then compare the results and say what is the best match for a certain battery type. Why is this important? It's this, yeah. So batteries have a lot of, these are the, I think, 12 key characteristics that we want to focus on. In an ideal world, you would be focusing on the design goal, but that's like a utopistic thing to have. You cannot achieve that. So battery technologies at the moment, with them we can concentrate on attributes that are within the light blue line. Yeah. And there you can actually change the attributes of a battery from the same chemical components by adding a few additives and tweaking the production process. You can suddenly be concentrating on a different attribute of the battery. So, it's very simple. You just imagine that a family car battery will have different requirements than, let's say, a supercar. Yeah, a family car battery should have a lot of cycles. It should have a long range, and it has to be safe. Yeah. But let's say a sports car, it doesn't have to have too many cycles. It has to have a high power performance, but it has to be light. And these are things that one can tweak within a battery. And this is where we differentiate ourselves and where we want to be more efficient than our competitors. And why it's also important is the fact that, and I mentioned this before, is that it's not only passenger cars that will require batteries. So there is a much broader mobility field to it. And this is how we're approaching it. So actually in the beginning, we are concentrating more on the so-called specialist car segment, like supercars and so on, because of production capacities. At the moment we have, at the moment we're actually just reconstructing the building that will host our R&D and pilot production line. and then we are going to scale the production. So at the moment, I mean, we can only fulfill the needs of customers that have lower production volumes per annum. But yes, in the future, like 5, 6, 7 years from now, we'll definitely have the capacities to, let's say, deliver to a client similar to Volkswagen that's producing hundreds and thousands of units of electric vehicles in the future. And then you can also see the reflection of these different segments on the right. Why is Slovakia for us a good location? Well, maybe some of you know that actually Slovakia is the biggest per capita car producer in the world in terms of passenger cars. But if you would, and we produce around 1 million cars per year. Slovakia has an inhabitants of 5.4 million inhabitants. And if you would draw a 500-kilometer circle around Slovakia, then I mean, the market here is quite huge. So it's 4.2 million cars or vehicles are being produced in the region. What's also important to mention that electrification is gradually coming in. So actually there are 19 models of cars produced in Slovakia that already have an electrification in their powertrain. I mean, only 4 of them are battery electric. I think 6 or 7 are plug-in hybrids, and then the rest are mild hybrids and hybrids with like a small battery. Nevertheless, it's a trend, and we hope that it will continue, and not just in Slovakia, but generally in the region. And the other thing is that actually in the V4 region, there has been a significant growth in car production, but also engine shops, like for the combustion engine cars, they have been like increasing. So actually 9 out of the current 35 facilities in the V4 countries are engine shops. So these will be gradually transforming, and in a way, as batteries are part of the propulsion, will be maybe phasing out some of the other components that go into the engine, and this is why it's a good region to do business for us. As for some milestones, very quickly, I think I may be over time already. We have a product. We have our first generation nickel mangan cobalt 622 cell produced that already is being tested with our clients. We have an external subcontractor for the production, as we don't have a facility at the moment. And we have started the whole process with also the NMC 811 cells. So it's a lower cobalt content battery with high nickel formats. And this we are expecting to have produced and certified actually, soon to come on the break of the 3rd and 4th quarter. What's very important that last year we managed to buy our facility in Vodihrady, Slovakia, not far away from Bratislava, which actually we got the building permit end of May, and we are starting to reconstruct it in like June. We already done all the preparations for the reconstruction, so it's a brownfield hall. We bought it as it is, and now we are reconstructing it for our needs, and it will host our R&D and pilot production facility. Next to it, we will build a 1 gigawatt-hour line that's next to this facility on our plot that we already own, and then we have a plan for a 16 plus gigawatt-hour gigafactory. This is a gigafactory scale of market standards that are being built in Europe, and this is a facility that we are now assessing the potential locations where to build it, and the site selection is CE wide. Generally said, InoBat is not only about the car batteries and the vehicle batteries. We also have a division that deals with energy storage. So we actually, InoBat Auto and InoBat Energy was granted the EU Commission notification on the IPCEI project. So these are 2 more advanced projects. So energy storage system, stationary storage for industrial use, that actually enables the implementation of renewable resources, as now finally you have a source that can hold all the energy that is generated during the day in case of solar and so on. And we want to close the whole battery value chain with also recycling. As a battery producer, it will be very important for us to be able to recycle our own scrap that comes from the process. And well, I mean, all the trends on e-mobility indicate that in a few years from now, there will be so many spent batteries on the market that it will be beneficial for us to recycle it and then get the materials for our own production process so that we don't have to source materials from outside of Europe. So this is all from my side. And I'm not sure how Q&As will be made, but I'm here and I am open to any questions. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Otto. Thank you very much for the presentation. You went a little bit over time, but I will pardon it because Innobat is a really unique concept in the CEE region, especially in Slovakia, because it's not only a startup that's developing something new, but the ambition and the scope of production and R&D, it's truly unique, and we are very happy to have this kind of project being developed right here in Slovakia. As for the Q&As, we have the Q&A function here at Zoom. But perhaps we can wait with the questions for later. You can stay here and wait through the presentation by Christian Kredatus of Ediris. That is a pre-recorded video. So if any question pops up during this time, feel free to ask, and I will ask the question to Otto. Actually, Otto will be able to see it too because he's a presenter. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in 3 minutes if any questions popped up. And now to Ediris and Christian Kredatus.
So hello everybody, my name is Christian. Thank you very much for having us. I'm a co-founder of startup called Ediris, where we develop technology that optimizes nutrition of farm animals. We leverage data, and obviously we need to use artificial intelligence to do that. So first, our team. We are actually a family business. My father, Stefan, has over 30 years of experience as animal nutritionist, has a vast experience in farming. My brother, Simon, is the CEO of the company and has actually a very good technical background and has been exposed to the industry of machine learning and artificial intelligence. As for myself, I have a purely business background, business school, some management consulting, industry experience, and investment banking as well. So what's the pain point that we are trying to solve? Largest cost that farmers incur is related to feeding the animals. Indeed, the slow and imprecise methodologies that are currently being used to optimize nutrition cause farmers to spend 15% more on feeding the animals that they should. That translates into 3 billion euros wasted every year just in Europe. And indeed, if farmers actually figured this out, they could actually significantly increase their margins. So this is where we step in. We leverage a relationship between nutrition that the cows are given, gases that the cows produce, and milk production, again, produced by cows. So how does it all work? We build a very simple sensor that we put inside a cowshed. One cowshed houses around 100 animals on average. This sensor gathers the information contained in gases and communicates with cloud platform. Now the cloud platform has in itself a software which we build. The software uses AI to build the recipe for a farmer and for animal nutritionists, telling them how to optimize nutrition for the better. Now, we've already done this a couple of times. You can see the results from our first pilot project. This took place in Slovakia on a farm of around 100 animals, took almost a year. And we basically managed to increase milk production of the herd while decreasing emissions caused by the herd as well. So there is a big ecological aspect in this business. We are very well aware that farmers operate on very thin margins, which means we cannot afford to charge them large sums or lump sums or anything like that. So we build a subscription-based model for this purpose, which basically means that farmers only pay a fixed monthly payment as a fee. They don't need to, they are not charged any capital expenditures, anything like that, purely OPEX for them, operating expenditures. If you translate this globally, this kind of pricing actually means that we've got around 2 billion euros in terms of addressable market. If you look it up on the internet, you will actually see that this is the market which is very, very quickly and dynamically growing over the past couple of years, and we don't expect it to stop anytime soon. So I've already mentioned a little bit the ecological aspect, as I'm pretty sure you already know, cows and other farm animals in general are pretty big problem when it comes to global emissions. They contribute to global emissions almost as much as the whole global traffic. So planes, cars, ships, cargoes, you name it. It's almost as bad when it comes to cows. So that's obviously a problem for the planet, and also a very interesting business opportunity, which, if tackled well, could bring a very interesting business model as well. We calculated if we scale up globally, we could actually reduce dairy segment emissions by around 12%. So that's a pretty interesting selling point as well. When it comes to competitors, we are not only bringing a solution that monitors the herd real time, but indeed brings some kind of a synthesis when it comes to problem solving. So it automatically solves the problem for the farmer, telling the farmer what to do in a very strict and very simple manner. Also, this solution is very cheap, since you only need one sensor for a big herd. You don't need, per cow analysis of gases or anything like that, because you cannot actually optimize nutrition for cows individually. You feed herd in an aggregate. When it comes to some social achievements, we've won a couple of competitions or accelerators. One of the most recent that you might be interested in is that we actually got incubated within HEC Paris incubator in France, within Station F. Station F is a very big startup hub, one of the largest in the world. And we also will start an accelerating program in Switzerland next month within Mass Challenge Switzerland. Mass Challenge, again, is one of the largest accelerators in the world, and we will be exposed to top corporates and startups in food tech. So that makes us very happy. Just maybe last thing, we have been fully bootstrapped. We don't have any external financing, which might change going forward. So we also, we think, a hot candidate for grants. So that's also a relevant field for us. Thank you very much for your attention. Hope nobody has fallen asleep by now. If so, then wake up, because I'm done talking. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
So thank you very much, Christian Kredatus of Ediris, Slovak startup dealing with livestock feed optimization and greenhouse gas emissions decrease at the same time. So at this point, I would like to thank you all for participating in this third event of the Slovak chairmanship at Taftie, and also the annual conference of Taftie 2021. It is not the last event. We have two more planned for this year. The closest one in time is in September, regarding networking and collaboration, and we're hoping that it can be at least partially in person. Some sort of hybrid setup would be great. So what did we see today? Well, we were inspired by Maaike Damen of the Netherlands talking about the excess material exchange, how we can reach sustainability and circular economy in industrial processes, reusing materials that would otherwise be trash. We have talked in the discussion a lot also about what is the role of innovation agencies in the innovation ecosystem globally in Europe, and also locally. We have quite a lot of inputs. And with Mr. Hoysig, and also in the discussion, we have talked about what does innovation need to be complemented with. It's not only about technological innovation, but it is also about inclusivity, one human aspect, and the other human aspect being beauty. And finally, Otto Pisoň from Inobat and Christian from Ediris presented what kind of innovation can be brewing in Slovakia in the CEE region. So we hope that you had good time with us today, that you have enjoyed the discussions and the talks, and see you in September. Bye-bye.